Friends.
I know there are no words that can express our sorrow and grief over the loss of those splendid young men and the injury to so many others. I know there are no words also that can ease the burden of grief for the families of those young men.
Those young men. At least 146. That's a new total, and I repeat for emphasis, at least 146 U.S. Marines and sailors now confirmed as dead, killed as they slept this morning by a terrorist suicide bomber at the Beirut airport, and scores of other U.S. servicemen wounded. Not far away, almost simultaneously, a similar bomb attack killed other young men, a reported 25 French soldiers, with many more Frenchmen missing. Good evening. This is a special edition of the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Picture the scene. It was just before dawn at Marine Headquarters Beirut, a 4-story building at the airport. Cooks were getting up to make breakfast. The others were sleeping late. Suddenly, a pickup truck loaded with explosives approached through an airport parking lot, accelerated past a sentry, crashed through barriers and sandbags, and then went directly into the building's lobby. There, it blew up. Within seconds, the building was rubble. Within seconds, more than 100 Marines and sailors were dead or dying. The heaviest U.S. casualties since Vietnam. One survivor's reaction, I cried, I cursed. Larry Pintack is in Beirut.
They are beyond anger, beyond outrage. The Marines in Beirut tonight are numb. They've long known they're a target for anti-government militias, but they were not prepared for this. Men who were sent to keep the peace in a country they didn't understand were murdered in their beds. Between 250 and 300 Americans were in the building when the suicide bomber struck. As snipers distracted the guards, a man in a truck laden with 2,000 pounds of explosives raced toward his target.
It went through 2 barricades, around another, and ended up in the lobby of the main complex that houses the headquarters of the battalion landing team.
To the Marines at the airport today, the questions of who and why were for the moment put aside. They were confused, edgy, but the only important thing was saving those who might still be alive beneath the rubble. Bit by bit, the broken concrete was removed by hand. The danger of further collapse is too great to allow the heavy equipment to do much beyond removing the largest pieces. As they tunneled into the ruins, the rescuers' lives too were in danger. But these were their friends they were trying to save, men they'd die for. Now and then, but not often enough, a battered but breathing survivor would emerge, staring, uncomprehending. But for each Marine who was found alive, there was another who had not survived. Many of the dead will not be identified for some time. Dental charts were destroyed along with everything else. Helicopters beat a much-used path to the fleet offshore, ferrying the wounded to the doctors aboard. Planes, too, were loaded for flights to European capitals. The lucky ones could make it to the choppers on their own, but most were dependent on their buddies, men who themselves suddenly felt helpless. Even those who were dug out were still not safe. As the day progressed and the casualty figures mounted, the number of wounded started to drop, and the total of dead rose even higher. For many of those rushed to the doctors died when they arrived. As the Marines struggled to save their own, the French were doing the same. Within minutes of the blast at the Marine headquarters, a similar car bomb tore through a French army barracks. Some 100 Frenchmen were inside. The message was clear. It's not just the U.S. that the bombers are trying to drive out. American officials here insist the Marines will not leave. The new U.S. ambassador who arrived yesterday toured the scene to emphasize that. But it was clear today the Marines' problems are not over. They will not be left alone in their misery. Snipers made that clear throughout the afternoon, harassing the Marines, even as they prepared to send home the bodies of the men and boys who died trying to keep peace in a country where it's so rarely seen. Larry Pintack, CBS News, Beirut.
A Navy hospital plane brought some of the wounded to an American military hospital in Naples, Italy. They had received first and second flight to Rhine-Main Air Base in West Germany. A total of 24 casualties arrived here. One died en route from the Middle East. They had been in the air for over 4.5 hours. Air Force helicopter crews wasted little time in ferrying the wounded to one of 3 military hospitals in the Frankfurt area. Some of the casualties were brought here to the U.S. Air Force Hospital in Wiesbaden, West Germany. It is the same place that became a temporary home for the hostages after they left Tehran. But this was anything but a joyous homecoming. There were no yellow ribbons this time. Of the 13 injured Americans in Wiesbaden tonight, 11 arrived in need of emergency surgery. Doug Tennell, CBS News, Wiesbaden, West Germany.
France's foreign minister called the bombing attacks madness, insanity, and he asked if France's peacekeeping role in Lebanon is necessary. But Prime Minister Marat said that while the attack on France's men was, and I quote, a blow both against France and against peace, he said the 2,000 French soldiers would not be pulled out. I'll have reaction from our U.S. Capitol in a minute.
There are 2 ways to buy insurance. From a one-company agent, but he's locked into only those policies that his company sells, or from an independent insurance agent. He doesn't work for just one company, he represents several, so he's free to help advise you on the best coverage at the best price. See your independent insurance agent, the more than one company agent. He's not locked into just one company. Remember this symbol. It's in the yellow pages.
Meet Merlin, the magical new communications system for small business. Touch one button and the Merlin system dials your important numbers automatically. Just a touch works many wonders. And just a cartridge adds new capabilities. Dial 1-800-247-1212 for the affordable Merlin system from AT&T Information Systems.
President Reagan's day began as a day of vacation. That was shattered by a sleep-ending telephone call telling him what had just happened in Beirut. White House correspondent Bill Plant takes the story from there.
President Reagan took off at dawn from Augusta, Georgia, where he and Secretary of State George Shultz had been on a less than tranquil golf weekend. Accompanied by National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane and Mrs. Reagan, they returned early to the White House. Mr. Reagan, after expressing his sorrow, quickly reaffirmed his intention to keep the Marines in Beirut.
But I think we should all recognize that these deeds make so evident the bestial nature of those who would assume power if they could have their way and drive us out of that area, that we must be more determined than ever that they cannot take over that vital and strategic area of the earth, or for that matter, any other part of the earth.
The president then went into the first of 2 meetings of his National Security Council to review intelligence reports of the attack. Smaller groups met throughout the day, keeping track of the situation. The second of those National Security Council meetings is still going on now after 2 hours. Reporters in the White House press room are awaiting some word. Dan?
Bill, what do you expect the next move to be by the president? Have you heard any talk of a short list of options?
Dan, since the administration has absolutely ruled out any change in the mission of the U.S. forces over there, and they've also ruled out an increase, the main option right now seems to be how to find a way to secure the position of the Marines. It's been suggested that they could be possibly moved, their position made somehow better, more secure, but we're waiting to find out.
Bill, have there been any congressional leaders at the White House this afternoon to confer with the president or be briefed?
The White House has been in touch with congressional leaders by telephone, Dan, and they say that they've continued that process through the day, keeping them abreast.
Our White House correspondent, Bill Plant. Bob Schieffer is standing by tonight at the State Department, where lights will be burning late over this calamitous turn of events. Bob, any read at the State Department on who's responsible for this?
Dan, the report received here was that it was the work of a group called the Islamic Revolutionary Movement. Now that a representative or a person identifying himself as a member of that group called the French press agency office in Beirut a little earlier today, told people there that his group was responsible, and said that 2 of the fighters who called themselves members of that group, aged 24 and 26, died in the attack. This is one of those fanatic Muslim revolutionary groups that in the past, the kind of group that has been identified as having ties with the revolutionary regime in Iran. However, in this particular case, Dan, no one has heard of a group calling itself by this name. So this is a new name, but this fits the pattern of the kinds of revolutionary groups that have been identified in the past as probably being responsible for the bombing of the embassy in Beirut.
Thank you, Bob. Our Pentagon correspondent David Martin is covering developments at the Defense Department, and we'll have his report in a moment.
What keeps America going on a freezing day? Presto! What brings football fans up to Green Bay? Presto!
A radiator could look this bad after just 10,000 miles of driving on weak, neglected antifreeze, while the Prestone radiator looks this good. That's the Prestone difference. Now go with Prestone and save. Buy 2 gallons right now and we'll send you $2 back by mail.
America saves with Prestone.
I can't believe I sold Dr. Scholl's air pillow insoles for 9 years in my drugstore and never tried them. Till today. The comfort is unbelievable. From this little insole.
Only Dr. Scholl's has the air pillow. It squeezes millions of air bubbles into the super thin cushion, so the pillow takes the pounding instead of your feet.
5 o'clock. And I feel like I've got a new pair of feet.
Dr. Scholl's air pillow insoles. Comfort so complete, it's like a new pair of feet.
Hello. I like this Remington microscreen rechargeable shaver so much, I bought the company. It shaves as close as a blade, or I'll give you your money back. The first microscreen is so thin it shaves incredibly close. The second even closer. And Remington's American-made. It costs less. Norelco's imported. It costs much more. The Remington microscreen rechargeable shaver shaves as close as a blade, or your money back.
And the Lady Remington rechargeable, the perfect gift. Shaves without a cord.
At the Pentagon, our military leaders tonight are asking cold, hard questions. Should this murderous attack have been prevented? And how can Marines guard against such attacks in the future? The answers are not easy to find, as we hear from David Martin.
The count kept going up until it was clear fully 10% of the Marine force in Lebanon had been killed or wounded. Next of kin had to be notified and replacements ordered in. Defense Secretary Weinberger seemed to rule out the idea of increasing the Marine force and instead focused on how to better defend the Marines already there.
I don't think that adding to them, adding to their numbers, will help them perform that mission. There's just talk of trying to get some kind of better position for them.
Pentagon aides said that would include building better fortifications for the Marines at the airport, constructing bunkers instead of using buildings, spreading out instead of congregating in a few places, and moving some of the Marines to ships offshore where they can eat and sleep in relative safety and be helicoptered back to their positions on land. Almost certainly there would be a buildup of American forces offshore where the battleship New Jersey is on station with 8 other ships. A major unanswered question: who is responsible for the bombing? Secretary Weinberger, who is seriously considering traveling to Beirut himself, voiced the suspicions of most U.S. officials.
There is a lot of circumstantial evidence, and a certain amount of it points toward Iran.
Today's bombing was remarkably similar to last April's suicide attack on the American embassy in Beirut, which U.S. intelligence believes was carried out by Iranians with Syrian help. A few weeks later, U.S. intelligence picked up warnings that the Iranians would try again to inflict massive casualties on Americans, but the warnings did not say what form the attack would take. Another reason for suspecting Iran is today's near-simultaneous attack against French forces. Iran has a particular bone to pick with France, since the French are supplying Super Étendard jets to Iraq for use in its war with Iran.
U.S. officials insist today's bombing has not changed the original Marine mission of policing the withdrawal of foreign forces from Lebanon. But for the moment, at least, the mission of the Marines has become one of self-defense and survival. David Martin, CBS News, The Pentagon.
News of the terrorist bomb hit Capitol Hill like a bomb itself. Earlier this month, under pressure from President Reagan and the White House, Congress approved a compromise to the War Powers Act to authorize Marines to remain in Beirut. Phil Jones reports on the reaction tonight.
It took the political clout of the Democratic Speaker for the President to get the 18-month extension through the House last month. And in the Republican-controlled Senate, the president just barely got the extension, with several Republicans finally placing party loyalty over their misgivings about leaving the Marines in Lebanon. And the only way the extension was granted was that the size of the force remained at about 1,200, that the mission remained peacekeeping, and that Congress could at any time, by joint resolution, direct withdrawal. Today, withdrawal was exactly what two Republicans who had voted for the 18-month extension were requesting.
I just hope and pray that we can get out of that situation as quickly as possible. We should get our boys out.
The Marines and the multinational force are really a target. They are a source of instability, and therefore how do we create that stability is to have them eventually removed.
Republican Mathias was more frustrated. On one hand, he suggested the administration had no Mideast policy that is worth the sacrifice, but on the other hand, he counseled against withdrawal.
To pull out, for example, would simply be to reward the murders. It would simply be to grant victory to the terrorists, and I don't think that's what we want to do.
And Democrats were saying no more blank checks for the president.
To continue an open-ended commitment in Lebanon is mission impossible, and we should not jeopardize our national security in that respect.
To hear several of the Democratic presidential candidates today, it was obvious that this foreign policy crisis is headed into Campaign 84.
It's incumbent on the president now to clearly, definitively spell out what our objectives are in Lebanon. And that should have been done a long time ago.
You're not keeping peace. You're having your man killed for no reason whatsoever.
But the frontrunner withheld his criticism.
Today ought to be a day of mourning for our nation.
Tomorrow, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will meet on this crisis, and House Democratic leaders are also expected to meet to discuss their strategy. But long before Congress acts, the president will have to move. And any move that does not expedite American forces from Lebanon will run into immediate political trouble here in Congress. Phil Jones, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Replacements for the dead and wounded U.S. Marines and sailors are already on their way to Beirut. That story is next.
There's more to John Hancock than life insurance.
You know, this home computer is one incredible tool.
But it's no substitute for personal financial advice.
You're right. And that's where the John Hancock companies come in, by providing a full range of financial services from stocks and bonds
to tax planning,
to IRAs. At John Hancock, they know a good financial plan starts with inside information.
John Hancock. We can help you here and now, not just hereafter.
My favorite time of day is night. I love curling up with a rich cup of coffee. You think coffee and sleep don't mix? They do if it's High Point. It's decaffeinated, and the flavor's marvelous. You see, High Point has a special way of capturing flavor, deep brewed flavor. It's a coffee lover's dream.
Deep brewed flavor makes High Point the coffee lover's decaffeinated.
Last week, a Marine amphibious unit sailed from North Carolina to replace the Marine unit in Beirut, but their task force was diverted to Grenada to guarantee the safety of Americans on that island, an island torn by a coup. Tonight, 200 other Marines are flying from Camp Lejeune to Lebanon to replace the victims of today's bombing. The Camp Lejeune commander said the men at his base were stunned by today's deaths, but he added morale remained high and the Marines were ready to go. Families of Marines in Lebanon anxiously awaited news of their sons and husbands. Liz Trotta talked with one such family in Queens, New York.
Like so many other parents across the country, Mr. and Mrs. Joshua Rosenberg were awaiting word of their son, Corporal Philip Simpson, stationed in Beirut since May.
Mrs. Rosenberg, did Corporal Simpson want to go to Beirut?
Yes.
He did?
Yes, he was very proud. He said to me, Mother, I'm going up over there. And I guarantee to you, if anything happened to me, I want you to be proud to die for my country.
When did he say that to you?
In the bedroom the night before he...
Liz Trotta, CBS News, New York.
So the family of Corporal Simpson, as with many others, awaited news of their Marine.
From the look, the style, the grace,
you know immediately this is a thoroughbred. The Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme for 1984. For most of its history, Cutlass Supreme has been the most popular midsize in America. And as in all thoroughbreds, behind the style is performance. Every time you take a ride.
There is a special feel in Oldsmobile. Freedom's the one that took the stick out of gum and puts the fresh in your breath. Yeah, Freedom's the one that took the stick out of gum and puts the fresh in your breath. Yeah, Freedom's the one.
Freedent gum not only won't stick to your dental work, it helps clean in between to freshen your breath while you chew.
Freedent's the one that took the stick out of gum and puts the fresh in your breath. Freedent's the one.
Freshen your breath with non-stick Freedent.
The first time ever I saw your face.
He'll always remember the first time he saw you, because the precious emollients in oil of Olay revive the radiance and soften tiny dry wrinkle lines.
The first time ever I saw your face.
Oil of Olay. It can help you look younger, too.
A federal appeals court this afternoon removed a lower court injunction and freed CBS News to broadcast exclusive material, secret government tapes that are to be used in the drug trial of automaker John DeLorean. Our law correspondent Fred Graham has the story and the tapes in Los Angeles.
The tapes show John DeLorean seated as an undercover agent posing as a...
The other half that's going out of here in as soon as we're done. And between this and the other, it'll generate about 4.5, not less than 4.5 mil.
Better than gold. Gold weighs more than that, for God's sakes.
2 minutes later, with the cocaine out of sight, a champagne cork is popped and the glasses are raised in a toast. An agent speaks first, then DeLorean.
It's to a lot of success for every gentleman for all your phone calls. Thank you.
The celebration is interrupted by a rap on the door. 2 FBI agents walk in.
Hi, John. Very question with the FBI. You're under arrest for narcotics law violation.
DeLorean's defense...
Before we ask you any questions, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent.
The CBS News broadcast 60 Minutes obtained the tapes from the publisher of Hustler magazine. He said he bought them from a man he believed worked for the U.S. government.
Well, the source I got them from was the government, actually. You know, everybody's got their price.
DeLorean's lawyers went to court to try to block CBS from broadcasting the tapes, claiming it would prejudice potential jurors.
The tapes are going to be broadcast to the public, totally out of context. It's going to be the government side of the case only, and they've indicated that the tapes are 90+% of their case. And Mr. DeLorean is going to be tried and perhaps, God forbid, even convicted through the media before he ever gets to trial.
The case went today before 3 judges of the U.S. Court of Appeals in Los Angeles. CBS argued that the First Amendment gave it the right to broadcast tapes legally obtained, and the court agreed. DeLorean's attorneys telephoned an appeal to Washington, where late today U.S. Supreme Court Justice William Rehnquist refused to block CBS from broadcasting the DeLorean tapes. Fred Graham, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Former Florida Governor Ruben Askew won an expected victory in a non-binding presidential straw poll at the Florida Democratic Convention today. Askew got almost 46% of the vote to a somewhat surprisingly strong 35% for former Vice President Walter Mondale. Senator John Glenn was third with 17%. Former Louisiana Governor Edwin Edwards has overwhelmingly won an unprecedented third term as governor. Returns from yesterday's 9-candidate open primary gave Democrat Edwards more than 62% of the vote to oust incumbent Republican Dave Treen, who got more than 36%. The other 7 candidates shared less than 2%. Some 17,000 runners set out this morning for the 14th annual New York City Marathon. The 26-mile, 385-yard course wound over rainy streets of all 5 New York boroughs to end in Central Park. There, Rod Dixon of New Zealand overtook the leader in the final yards to become the first foreign male runner to win the marathon. Dixon's time, 2 hours, 8 minutes, 59 seconds. Jeff Smith of Britain, who had been the leader until almost the very last, was second. He collapsed after he crossed the finish line. In the women's division, it was a familiar story. Greta Waitz of Norway won for the 5th time in the last 6 years. Her time, 2 hours, 27 minutes. To summarize now late details of today's bloody terrorist attack on U.S. Marines and sailors in Beirut. At least 146, repeating, 146 U.S. servicemen of the peacekeeping force now confirmed as having been killed, and scores of others were wounded when a truck packed with explosives blew up in their airport headquarters. In another similar attack nearby, at least 25 French soldiers died. President Reagan expressed his grief and sorrow, but said this morning's attack would not change the mission of the peacekeepers. This has been a special edition of the CBS Evening News. We'll have more on the killing in Beirut later tonight in a special expanded edition of the CBS Late Sunday Night News at 11 o'clock, 10 Central Time. This is Dan Rather, CBS News, New York.
Some are born to lead with noble spirit and endless ability, like the Canon A1. The A1, with 5 automatic exposure modes plus manual, to stop action or let it flow, to control depth of field, to add light automatically, to use light dramatically. The Canon A1, born to lead.
Canon, the official 35mm camera of the 1984 Olympics.
Every day, thousands of executives are faced with having to be in 2 places at once. That's why AT&T created the concept of teleconferencing. Using the most powerful communication network in the world, teleconferencing lets you communicate over thousands of miles face-to-face without having to be there face-to-face. AT&T, expanding your ability to communicate.
I'm Bill Curtis. Tomorrow, conservative Republicans raid President Reagan. And in our 8:30 half hour, Sybil Shepherd. Wake up to what's happening on the CBS Morning News.
This is CBS.